At 4:12 on a Thursday afternoon, a town clerk asked me to delete a street. Not rename it, not mark it closed, delete it. The street was called Mill Road Spur. 11 lots, 1 dead-end turn, parcel numbers still attached. I told her, if it has addresses, I can't remove it. She was standing behind my chair, one hand resting on the back of it. She leaned closer to my laptop and said, "There are no addresses there." Then she reached over my shoulder and shut the laptop herself. Welcome to the last broadcast, where some stories were never meant to be heard. I was in Grayridge because of a county mapping contract. Not exciting work, not even close. The county was updating emergency response records, which meant every rural road, private lane, trailer, barn, farmhouse, and half-forgotten driveway had to match the new digital map. If somebody called 911, the system had to know where to send help. That was the whole job. I scanned old property cards, checked tax records, matched road names, and corrected boring mistakes that had been copied from one system into another for 30 years. Grayridge was supposed to be my easiest stop. Small town, 1 diner, 1 church, 1 grain elevator at the north end. Town hall shared a building with the library, so every few minutes I could hear the front desk bell when somebody returned books. The clerk's name was Mrs. Vale. Silver hair, glasses on a chain, soft voice. She was friendly, but not warm. There's a difference. She had already cleared a desk for me in the records room. No trash can, no extra chair. The desk phone was unplugged, with the cord wrapped neatly around the base. I thought that was odd. Not scary, just odd. The first thing I noticed was the old town map on the wall. It was framed behind glass, probably from the 80s. Main Street, Church Road, Turner Lane, the grain elevator, the old mill pond. But just north of the elevator, there was a pale scrape in the paper, a small, rectangular patch, like somebody had used the blade to remove one road name without taking the map out of the frame. Mrs. Vale caught me looking. "Sun damage," she said. There was no window on that wall. I smiled anyway and started working. For the first hour, everything was normal. A farmer came in to argue about a drainage permit. A kid in the library section kept dragging his sneakers against the carpet. The copy machine made the whole room smell like warm paper. Then Mill Road Spur appeared, first on a 1987 parcel map, then on a 1994 tax sheet, then on an old emergency route list that looked like it had been typed on a machine with one bad key. The directions were simple: main north, past elevator, left at chain, Mill Spur households pending verification. I read that last line again. Households pending verification. Not abandoned, not vacant. Households. That mattered. I asked Mrs. Vale if Mill Road Spur had been renamed. She came over slowly. I turned the screen toward her. That was my first mistake. I showed her exactly what I had found. She looked at the screen for maybe 2 seconds. Then she said, "That road isn't used anymore." I said, "It still has parcel numbers." She said, "Then the county made a mistake." And that's when she shut my laptop. For a few seconds, the room went quiet in a strange way. Not silent, just careful. The library bell rang out front. Somebody turned a page. Mrs. Vale kept her hand on my laptop like it belonged to her. "You can skip that one," she said. I said, "I still have to flag it." Her smile stayed in place. "No," she said, "you don't." At lunch, I went across the street to Clara's Diner. Green booths, old ceiling fan, pie case near the register. The ketchup bottles were all half full because they kept marrying them together. A man in a seed company cap sat at the counter. when he heard me tell the waitress I was working with the county. He turned his coffee mug in a slow circle. "For the roads?" he asked. "Address cleanup," I said. He nodded like I had confirmed something. Then he said, "Don't let them send you past the elevator." The waitress stopped writing. Only for a second. I asked, "What's past the elevator?" The man looked at her, then back at me. "Mud," he said. That was all. Mud. At the time, I thought he meant the road washed out, some old drainage issue the town didn't want to pay for. Small towns have places like that. Everyone knows. Nobody wants paperwork. That was the first wrong explanation I gave myself. When I got back, the paper maps on my desk had been moved. The 1987 map was gone. So was the emergency route list. In their place was a newer zoning map with a yellow sticky note on top. Use this version. Under that, in smaller handwriting, no field check needed. I took a picture of the note. Mrs. Vale watched me do it. She didn't stop me. That bothered me more than if she had. Around 3, a man in an orange public works vest walked in. Dale. That was the name stitched on his jacket. Big guy. Clean boots. Too clean for someone who supposedly worked outside all day. He leaned against the doorway and asked if everything was going smoothly. I said yes. He said, "County people get turned around here." I told him I had GPS. He smiled, "Not north of the elevator." Then he looked at Mrs. Vale. Mrs. Vale looked at him, and Dale said, "Some roads are better left on paper." Nobody laughed. At 5:15, Mrs. Vale told me town hall closed early on Thursdays. It didn't. The hours were printed on the front door, but I packed my laptop anyway. I drove out of town, made a loop, then came back in from the highway side. I wasn't trying to be brave. I was irritated. There's a specific kind of anger you get when people treat you like you are too temporary to matter. The grain elevator sat at the north edge of Grayridge. Tall and gray, with old corn dust stuck to the metal siding. Behind it was a gravel lane. No road sign, no mailbox. Just a rusted chain between 2 leaning wooden posts. I parked near the elevator and walked over. The air smelled like dry feed and hot metal. On the right post, low to the ground, someone had painted 3 black numbers, 617. Not at driver height. Lower, where you would see it if you were walking out from behind the chain. I took one picture. Then I noticed a porch light through the trees. Small, yellow, maybe 100 yards in. I stepped closer to the chain, and another porch light came on. Then another, one by one. Not motion lights, porch lights. Like someone back there had seen me standing at the entrance and was telling the others. I was still looking when a truck door closed behind me. Dale stood beside a white municipal pickup. He didn't yell. That made it worse. "Road's closed," he said. "I'm not on the road." He looked at my phone, then at the chain, then back at me. "You're close enough to make word for people." I wanted to say something smart. Nothing came. I got in my car and left, and my hand shook just enough that I missed the ignition the first time. That night, I stayed at a motel 15 minutes outside Grayridge, not in town. I uploaded the photos to the county folder, the sticky note, the post, the porch lights. Then I zoomed in on the picture of the chain. 617 was clear, but there was something else behind it, a shape between the trees. A person standing half behind a trunk. Not close, not facing away either, facing me. And they were holding up one hand, not waving, flat palm. Stop. The next morning, I got to town hall before Mrs. Vale. A younger woman was at the library desk. Her name tag said Aaron. I asked if the local history room was open. She stared at me for a second too long. Then she handed me a key attached to a wooden paddle labeled Archives. Quietly, she said, "Be done before she parks." The archive room was barely a room, file cabinets. yearbooks, parade photos, old newspapers, boxes labeled by year instead of contents. I searched Mill Road Spur. Nothing. So I searched the grain elevator. That was when I found the clipping about Caleb Rusk, 1998. Missing boy. Last seen near the elevator after school. Blue backpack, red bike, search volunteers, dogs brought in from the next county. For a minute, I thought that was the secret. A missing kid. Maybe he went down that road. Maybe the town covered up an accident. It made sense for about 10 minutes. Then I found a Founders Day photo from 2003. Kids on bikes, a fire truck, folding chairs along Main Street, and in the background, behind the grain elevator, 6 people stood on the wrong side of the chain. Not part of the parade, just watching. One of them was a boy with a blue backpack. Caleb Rusk hadn't disappeared. He had been removed. The archive door clicked behind me. Erin stood there. She saw the photo in my hand and closed the door almost all the way. "My aunt was born there," she said. I asked. "On Mill Road Spur?" She shook her head. "Don't say it here." Then she pulled open the bottom drawer of the cabinet and took out a thin folder that had no label. Inside was a photocopy of an Old Town memo. 1999. Grayridge had received a rural redevelopment grant after declaring the old mill housing vacated and unsafe. The memo listed 11 homes, all marked cleared, all marked unoccupied, but stapled behind it was another page, a handwritten page, same 11 homes, different column, names, Bell, Rusk, Hale, Morrow, Vale. Next to each name was the same phrase, unresolved household. Erin tapped the page. "They said those houses were empty so they could take the grant money," she whispered. "Then the families that stayed became a problem." I said, "Why not just move them?" She looked at me like I'd asked something childish. Move them where? With what address? With what records? That was when I understood enough to be afraid. Not all of it. Enough. If Mill Road Spur existed, Grayridge had lied for decades. About property. About grants. About missing people. About emergency calls that maybe never got answered because officially nobody lived there. Erin took the photo from me and slid it into a yearbook instead of the folder. "Leave now," she said. "Not after lunch." "Now." I walked back to the records room. Mrs. Vale was already sitting at my desk. My laptop was open. I had shut it the night before. On the screen was the county search bar. One word had been typed into it. Bell. Mrs. Vale looked up at me. She had brought coffee. I don't drink coffee. She set it beside the laptop anyway. Then she said, "Your mother's people were Bells, weren't they?" I had never told her that. My last name isn't Bell. My mother hadn't used that name since before I was born. I asked how she knew. Mrs. Vale said, "Some names don't leave clean." That was when the whole thing stopped being a records problem. It was family. It was me. I packed my laptop. I said I needed to call the county office. Mrs. Vale nodded. Then she reached down and unplugged the office phone from the wall. Very calm. Very neat. "You can use your cell outside," she said. The library was open. People were there. A mother with a stroller. An old man reading the paper. A teenager at the computer. Nobody looked up. That scared me more than Dale. Outside, under my windshield wiper, was a copy of my county work order. Across the top, written in blue pen, "Bell line confirmed." I left it there. I don't know why. Maybe touching it felt like agreeing with it. At the edge of town, the railroad crossing lights started flashing. The gate came down. No train came. Behind me, Dale's white pickup turned onto the road. Then another municipal truck pulled in behind him. They didn't rush. They didn't honk. They just waited, like this was routine. I sat there for almost 4 minutes, watching empty tracks. Then I saw the narrow service path beside the cemetery. I drove around the gate. My car dropped hard into the gravel, scraped underneath, and tore something loose that dragged for the next 10 miles. I didn't stop until I reached the county highway. My supervisor didn't really believe me. He said rural towns got protective about old records. He said he would touch base with Grayridge. By Monday, my county login stopped working. By Wednesday, the contract ended early. By Friday, Mill Road Spur was gone from every file I had saved. Even the cached map on my laptop updated itself. Just trees now, a blank strip behind the elevator. 2 weeks later, I asked my mother about Grayridge. She didn't cry. That would have been easier. She just sat at her kitchen table and folded a napkin into smaller and smaller squares. Finally, she said, "Your grandmother got us out before they wrote you down." I asked what that meant. She said, "It means your birth certificate would have had no street on it." Then she pushed a shoebox across the table. Inside were old birthday cards, school forms, and one faded Grayridge newsletter from 1996. At the bottom was a list titled, "Families Waiting Address Confirmation." Bell was on it. Rusk was on it. Vale was on it. I asked my mother why a town would do that to people. She said, "Because if nobody can prove where you live, nobody has to explain where you went." The last thing I received from Grayridge came by accident. A printed emergency response map mailed to old contractors. Page 12. Grayridge, Main Street, Church Road, North Elevator Lane. Everything clean, everything normal. But behind the grain elevator, where Mill Road Spur used to be, there was a small gray square. Not a road, not homes, not property. Just one label. Municipal Storage. I stared at it for a long time, because I had seen the porch lights. I had seen the people in the parade photo. I had seen the warning hand in the trees. They didn't put the road back. They didn't erase it completely either. They gave it a label nobody would question. A storage building. A place with no residents, no mail, no school bus, no reason for an ambulance to go there. And under the gray square, printed so small I almost missed it, was the new emergency access code. 617-B. My mother saw it over my shoulder. For the first time since I brought up Grayridge, she looked scared. Not confused, not surprised. Scared. She pointed at the letter after the number. "B doesn't mean building," she said. I asked her what it meant. She took the map from me and folded it once, then again, until the gray square was gone. "Bell," she said.